In global football, there is one absolute rule. The governing body never admits a mistake. A straight red card is a death sentence. There is no standard mechanism for appeal. You get the card, you serve the suspension, and you do not ask questions. But just hours after a controversial call threatened to derail a massive tournament run, the most powerful sports organization on the planet did something entirely unprecedented. They bent their own unbreakable laws to save a 23-year-old striker from the United States. His name is Folarin Balogun. He had just scored his third goal of the tournament. It was the game-winning goal against Bosnia that secured a spot in the next round. Then came the red card. It was a moment of pure despair. The American team was suddenly facing elimination without their best player. But that despair quickly turned into a massive political shockwave. Donald Trump posted a triumphant message on Truth Social. He thanked the global governing body for doing what is right and reversing a great injustice. The system had actually folded. But behind that public celebration is not just a miraculous reversal of fortune on the pitch. It is the story of how the United States triggered a secret legal loophole to force the hand of a sports empire. It is the story of the American exemption. The reality of this situation goes far beyond a referee making a bad call. It exposes the raw mechanics of power. By the time we finish breaking down this case, you will understand exactly how the ultimate governing body was backed into a corner and forced to rewrite their own reality. To understand why this decision sent shockwaves through the world of sports governance, you have to look at exactly what the United States was about to lose. On Monday, in Seattle, they are set to face Belgium in a massive knockout match. This is the round of 16. The stakes could not be higher. A loss means you go home. A win means you keep the dream alive for an entire nation. And they were going to have to step onto that field without Folarin Balogun. Flo Balogun is not just another player on the roster. He is the engine of the American attack. He is the one who delivered the fatal blow to Bosnia. Taking him out of the lineup against a powerhouse like Belgium is like walking into a heavyweight title fight with one arm tied behind your back. And that is exactly what the red card mandated. The rules are rigid by design. When a referee issues a direct red card for violent conduct, the player is automatically suspended for at least one game. The Federation has no recourse to appeal the decision under normal protocols. The disciplinary code is written to protect the authority of the officials on the pitch. If teams could overturn red cards every time they felt wronged, the entire authority structure of the game would collapse. The referees would lose all credibility. The governing body would be flooded with endless appeals from every nation that felt slighted. So they established a culture of absolute finality. The referee speaks, and the world obeys. So the American Federation was trapped. They had a star player wrongfully accused of violent conduct. They had a crucial match looming in Seattle. And they faced a legal framework that offered absolutely no way out. The initial response from the Federation reflected this grim reality. They knew the rules. They knew the history of how these appeals usually end. They end in silence. You can imagine the frustration inside the American camp. The players knew the call was wrong. The fans watching the slow-motion replays knew the call was wrong. Even neutral observers could see that jumping for a ball did not warrant a career-defining punishment. But the system does not care about what is fair. The system only cares about preserving its own authority. The United States was backed against a wall by a bureaucracy that refuses to yield to anyone. It is a feeling of total helplessness. You play by the rules, you perform at the highest level, and a single arbitrary decision strips it all away. The governing body demands total compliance from every nation involved in their tournaments. They operate like an independent nation-state, with their own laws and their own Supreme Court. Nobody challenges them and wins. The smaller nations accept bad calls every single tournament because they have no political leverage. They just swallow the injustice and go home. But what happens when the victim of that arbitrary decision is the most lucrative market on earth? What happens when the injustice catches the attention of the most powerful political figures in the host nation? The tension was no longer just about a football match. It became a standoff between the stubborn arrogance of a sports monopoly and the unstoppable force of American political pressure. If you have ever felt furious at a faceless institution shutting you down without a fair hearing, you know exactly how the fans in Seattle felt. You know the anger of watching a bureaucracy hide behind its rulebook to defend a terrible mistake. But this time, the bureaucracy blinked. You need to see how this story unfolds. Stay with me as we look at the exact mechanism the United States used to break this unbreakable system. Rafael Klaus did not issue the red card on the field. You must remember this single, critical detail as we unpack this entire scandal. The Brazilian referee was standing right there on the grass. He watched the play unfold in real time, right in front of his eyes. He saw Folarin Balogun jump for a loose ball. He saw the physical collision between the players. He saw exactly what happened at full speed, and he did not even issue a caution. There was no yellow card. There was no foul called. The game was simply supposed to move on. But then the invisible voice in his earpiece chimed in. The video assistant referee asked Klaus to stop the match, walk over to the sideline, and look at the monitor. This is the exact moment where the reality of the game was completely distorted. The officials sitting in the dark VAR room replayed the sequence in extreme slow motion. They broke down a natural athletic movement frame by frame until it looked like a calculated, intentional assault. They manufactured a narrative of violent conduct out of absolutely nothing. Violent conduct is a term reserved for the worst, most malicious offenses in the sport. It means punching an opponent in the face. It means kicking out with intent to injure. It means biting or spitting. Balogun did none of these things. He simply jumped into the air for a soccer ball. So you have to ask yourself how a routine soccer play turns into a violent conduct dismissal. Who is really running the game? Is it the referee on the field feeling the flow of the match, or the invisible officials in the replay booth searching for microscopic infractions? The slow-motion replay lied, and the system bought the lie completely. The red card was issued. The automatic one-game suspension was triggered immediately. Alongside this absurd ruling on the field, the reaction off the field exploded into absolute, uncontrollable chaos. The internet erupted in unprecedented outrage. Fans from every corner of the country demanded an immediate investigation into Rafael Klaus. They called the decision atrocious. They called it a deliberate sabotage. They pointed out the referee had a long history of questionable calls in Brazil, and now he was bringing that chaos to the biggest stage in the world. The anger was not just a passing social media trend that would fade in a day. It was a massive, sustained wave of public fury directed straight at the governing body. People were demanding that the red card be rescinded immediately. But remember the rigid nature of the rulebook. The rulebook explicitly says there is no mechanism for an appeal when it comes to a direct red card. The governing body simply does not listen to angry fans, no matter how loud they yell. Alongside the incredible fan outrage, the pressure began to escalate to a level the global sports world rarely ever sees. High-profile voices started chiming in across every platform. The narrative quickly shifted from a simple bad refereeing decision to a deliberate institutional sabotage of the American team. Then the ultimate political weight was thrown onto the scales. Donald Trump stepped into the public arena to voice his absolute displeasure. The rhetoric became explosive, uncompromising, and deeply threatening to the establishment. There were loud public demands for a 100% tariff on all entities related to the governing body until the suspension was lifted. The situation escalated rapidly and dangerously. It was no longer just about Folarin Balogun missing a knockout game. It was about national pride. It was about a foreign, untaxed entity coming onto American soil and imposing an unjust, unappealable ruling on the host nation. The governing body was staring down a full-blown political and commercial crisis. They depend heavily on the American market for their survival and expansion. They need the massive television revenue. They need the corporate sponsors to keep their global machine running. They could not afford a protracted public war with American political figures and a furious American public. So they had to find a way out of their own trap. How do you cancel an unappealable suspension without admitting your elite referees are completely incompetent? How do you bow to immense political pressure without breaking your own sacred laws and destroying the illusion of your absolute authority? The governing body faced an impossible, existential puzzle. They had to appease the American public and the American political apparatus before the situation spiraled completely out of their control. But they absolutely refused to admit that Rafael Klaus and the elite VAR team made a catastrophic error on the world stage. Overturning the red card directly would destroy the carefully crafted illusion of referee infallibility. It would open the floodgates for every other nation on Earth to demand video reviews and legal appeals for their own bad calls. The entire disciplinary system would collapse overnight. They needed a magic trick. They needed to make the suspension disappear without actually erasing the red card from the official records. The solution was buried deep inside their own legal framework. It was a loophole hidden in a massive, dense document that most fans and even most pundits never bother to read. If you look closely at Chapter 4, Article 27 of the official disciplinary code, you will find the exact escape route they used to save face. This highly specific article deals with the suspension of the implementation of measures. The judicial body of the organization has the obscure power to fully or partially suspend the execution of a disciplinary sanction. They did not issue a statement saying the red card was a mistake. They did not say Folarin Balogun was entirely innocent of the charge. They simply stated that they were suspending the suspension itself for a probationary period of 1 year. If Balogun commits another infringement of a similar nature during this probationary period, the original suspension is revoked and enforced. That is the exact wording they used to justify this. They put a player on probation for jumping for a ball. They treated a standard athletic movement like a criminal offense that requires a parole period. This just highlights the absurdity of the entire situation. They built a bridge of legal jargon just so they could walk backward away from a disastrous refereeing error. This is a brilliant, terrifying, and deeply cynical bureaucratic maneuver. It is legal gymnastics at its absolute finest. They preserved the red card on the official record, meaning Rafael Klaus is technically protected from being officially overruled or humiliated. But Folarin Balogun gets exactly what he wants. He gets to walk onto the pitch in Seattle and play in the massive knockout match against Belgium. The United States Soccer Federation, acting through representatives like Stu Holden, quickly released a formal, carefully worded statement. They said they accepted the decision by the disciplinary committee and were pleased that Balogun was eligible to play. It was a polite, formal nod to a backroom political deal that saved the tournament for the host nation. Donald Trump immediately posted a victory lap on Truth Social, thanking the governing body for doing what is right and reversing the great injustice. The crisis was averted, but the cost was the integrity of the rulebook itself. This is not standard operating procedure for global football. Teams from smaller, less influential federations do not get this kind of bespoke, high-level legal treatment. When a player from a developing football nation gets a terrible red card, they sit out the next match in total silence. Nobody digs into the obscure text of Chapter 4, Article 27, to save them from a missed game. Nobody suspends their suspension. Nobody creates a magical probationary period for a team that does not drive billions of dollars in television revenue. This level of legal creativity is exclusively reserved for the most powerful actors in the room. They call it a probationary period in the official press release, but we all know what this really is. This is the American exemption. The governing body looked at the severe financial and political consequences of eliminating the best American player from the biggest tournament on earth, and they simply decided their own rigid rules could be bent. They created a custom, one-time solution just to defuse the ticking time bomb of American outrage. Folarin Balogun is free to play today, not because the slow-motion replay finally vindicated his innocence, but because the system bent the knee to superior leverage. The American exemption is now a documented legal precedent in the highest levels of the sport. We have watched a supposedly untouchable, sovereign institution rewrite its own reality to avoid a collision with American power. You are witnessing the American exemption in real time, and it permanently changes the fundamental nature of how this sport is governed. Look at how easily a rigid rulebook can be folded in half when the right people apply the pressure. Do you think this unprecedented maneuver is a victory for fairness on the pitch? Or does it prove that the entire disciplinary system is just a tool negotiated by the most powerful nations? Let me know your read on this exact loophole down in the comments, because this single decision completely redefines how we look at every future red card. When the official statement dropped, the reality of the situation finally settled in. The United States Soccer Federation relayed the message directly through Stu Holden. The federation stated they accepted the decision by the disciplinary committee and were pleased that Balogun was eligible to play. They did not gloat. They did not mock the referee. They simply acknowledged that the legal maneuver had worked perfectly. Alongside this highly sanitized official release, you had a completely different tone coming from the political sphere. Donald Trump posted his message on Truth Social, aggressively thanking the governing body for doing what is right and reversing the great injustice. These two statements represent the dual forces that broke the system. You have the polite corporate maneuvering of the Federation, backed by the raw, uncompromising political leverage of the American state. These are the undisputed facts on the ground. A direct red card was issued by Rafael Klaus on the field in front of a global audience. The rules explicitly state there is absolutely no standard appeal mechanism for a direct dismissal. Yet, the suspension was magically suspended for 1 year under the obscure text of Chapter 4, Article 27. To understand how we arrived at this unprecedented moment, we have to look at the massive commercial engine driving this entire tournament. This is not just a game played on grass for the love of the sport. This is the most lucrative entertainment product on the planet, and the governing body relies entirely on the host nation to make it happen. They need the American infrastructure. They need the American security apparatus. They need the massive broadcast rights and the endless stream of corporate sponsorships that only the United States can provide. The United States is the golden goose for global football governance. You do not antagonize the golden goose over a questionable VAR intervention. You do not risk a full-scale political boycott just to protect the fragile ego of a Brazilian referee. When political figures start talking about a 100% tariff on all related entities, the dynamic shifts instantly. The math simply does not add up for the executives sitting in their luxury suites in Europe. They are tasked with protecting the financial integrity of the organization above all else, alongside the massive television deals, alongside the local ticket sales, alongside the billion-dollar corporate partnerships. There is the simple reality of political and institutional survival. The governing body folded because they absolutely had to fold. Folarin Balogun is the human face of this massive institutional pivot. He is not a chess piece. He is a 23-year-old forward who scored the game-winning goal against Bosnia in the round of 32. He has 3 goals in this tournament. He is the central, indispensable piece of the American offensive puzzle. Erasing him from the knockout bracket would have completely destroyed the local momentum for the tournament. The executives knew exactly what was at stake for their bottom line. They chose to preserve the commercial viability of the event, even if it meant exposing their own sacred rulebook as a highly flexible document. If you look at the history of this tournament, you will see a long line of smaller nations that have been completely crushed by bad refereeing decisions. Those nations protest, they cry foul, and they are ignored. They are told to respect the finality of the referee on the pitch. They are told that human error is just part of the beautiful game. But that logic suddenly vanishes when the host nation is staring down a catastrophic elimination. The historical precedent is now shattered. We now know that the rules are absolute until they are inconvenient for a superpower. The paradox we started with at the beginning of this investigation is now completely resolved. The untouchable institution proved that it can, in fact, be touched. Folarin Balogun gets to walk onto the field in Seattle today to face Belgium. The American team keeps their top scorer for the biggest match of their lives. The fans inside the stadium get the spectacle they paid for. It is a massive, historic victory for the host nation. But as we step back from the immediate excitement, we have to ask what this means for the rest of the sporting world. We just witnessed a complete collapse of institutional equality. We saw a rigid bureaucracy bend over backwards, desperately digging through Chapter 4, Article 27, just to create a legal loophole for a commercial giant. They invented a probationary period for a red card in the middle of a major tournament. This is the American exemption in its purest, most undeniable form. It is the ultimate proof that the rules do not apply equally to everyone on the pitch. The governing body stood on one side, heavily armed with their unappealable laws and their slow-motion video replay monitors. The American political and commercial machine stood on the exact opposite side, armed with economic threats and massive public outrage. The bureaucracy surrendered without putting up a fight. If the fundamental laws of the game can be suspended when the political temperature gets too hot, then the laws of the game are strictly suggestions. We are left looking at a severely broken system where justice is not determined by the referee on the field, but by the geopolitical and financial weight of the nation filing the complaint. Folarin Balogun is free to play today. The United States won the brutal boardroom battle behind closed doors, but the integrity of the tournament took a massive, permanent hit that will echo for decades. We are going to keep relentlessly tracking these institutional power plays as the tournament moves forward, because the tension between the governing body and the host nation is far from over. The precedent has been set, and the next controversy is already brewing. If you want to understand how the real game is played off the pitch when the cameras are turned off, stay with us and follow the story as it develops. This is not just a tournament, this is a defining moment for the future of global sports.